Welcome to the Humans Outside podcast, where we are building a life around getting outdoors through learning from fascinating outside-minded guests. I'm Amy Bouchatz, a journalist originally from the beach in California, now working to love nature from my home in Alaska. Since September 2017, I've spent at least 20 consecutive minutes outside every single day, no matter the weather. On this show, we hear from others who make heading into nature just a part of who they are while we work to do the same. If you love what we do, you can support Humans Outside on Patreon or leave us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts. Ready for the good stuff? Let's go. Hetty Key is an endurance athlete and adventurer, and even cooler, the lead researcher at Women in Adventure, a UK-based organization that, among other things, researches the link between mental health and spending time outside. That's something that really speaks to us here at Humans Outside podcast, where we are exploring for ourselves that intersection of mental health and a regular outdoor habit. And she's going to talk to us today about that research and what it means for those of us looking to the outside for that help. Hetty, thank you so much for joining us today on the Humans Outside podcast.
Hi there. Thank you so much for having me on. It is absolutely lovely to have the opportunity to talk to you.
Awesome. So we start our podcasts imagining ourselves in our guest's favorite outdoor space, like as if you were not in the UK and I was not in Alaska and we were just hanging out, having a chat outside somewhere awesome. So where are we with you today?
Oh, I think probably because the seasons are changing here and it feels like it's becoming more wintry, I naturally am gravitating towards a snowy memory that was earlier this year, back in January, back when we could travel a little more. And I was lucky enough to be ski touring in Kazakhstan. And that was absolutely incredible. So what I've got in my head is this incredible, vast, open, snowy landscape with incredible powder, lots of trees below the mountains, and big skies.
Yeah. And I don't think we've ever recorded a podcast in Kazakhstan. So that's new for us here.
Oh, amazing.
Perfect.
It was an incredible place to visit.
Awesome. So can you start by telling us about your own relationship with the outdoors, maybe featuring Kazakhstan, and how did you become a person who loves adventure and spending time outside?
So I grew up in the Peak District in the UK, which is one of our national parks. And so I was lucky enough to have the outdoors essentially on my doorstep. And I spent a huge amount of time outside as a kid, not necessarily doing anything particularly like active or sporty. I mean, I did enjoy sport, but I wasn't kind of in inverted commas a sporty kid at school. I was, like middle to bottom, being picked for teams, tried pretty hard, but maybe didn't really have a particular like natural flair for sport. And so I think the outdoors has always been part of my life. And the time where it really kind of came alive for me was actually just after university. I found that a lot of my friends in the city I lived, Sheffield, had gone down to London or to various places for jobs. And I was left in a city that I knew incredibly well, but suddenly knew no one in. And it was very bizarre. And I felt really inspired to get back into the more outdoorsy things I'd enjoyed as a kid, be it like walking, cycling, a little bit of climbing. And I didn't really have a clue where to start. So I turned to Google. This is many years ago now, but I turned to Google and was kind of where do I go? What do I do? And I essentially spent 2 years, trying to run up hills, falling down them on bikes, just giving everything a go and not really having a clue what I was doing, but absolutely loving it and kind of feeling my way through working out what I like doing and what aspects of the outdoors I enjoy the most.
I love that because I think a lot of people who maybe aren't outdoorsy and who are in that place where you were before your friends moved off, right? Um, think about being outdoorsy as something that's naturally occurring, not something that you have to like try for. Before we started recording, I was talking to you about how at some point my husband and I went to the outdoor store and just bought everything, right, for camping because we didn't
Mhm.
have anything and we never camped before. But that was that moment where we decided that we were going to do that. And when you sat down to Google, you had to decide you're as an adult that this is something that you're going to try and go back to or start.
Yeah, I remember like I went and borrowed my dad's mountain bike, which was I think it was like 20 years old or something. And I had no idea like really what I was doing or how it worked. Or the fact that it was like really, really out of date in terms of technology, and everyone like most of the people I met because they commented on how old the bike was and how inappropriate the bike was for what I was doing. And bits of it would like fall off coming down the hill. The brakes wouldn't really work, but I was having a great time. And I think something that really helped me was knowing that you can try lots of different things. Like I'm definitely like a jack of all trades and master of none. Although someone once said master of fun, which I thought was clever. I like doing lots of different things. I'm not particularly an expert at any of them, but it's okay to like try, you might try water sports and be like, oh God, that's not for me.
Mhm.
But then maybe climbing or hiking really like takes your fancy. So I think there's a huge amount to being outdoors and adventurous, and we don't have to love like every aspect because we love the outdoors. We can find our bit.
That's such a good point. Like, you don't have to like, people are like, oh, I don't like being cold or I don't like being hot. Well, like, you don't have to like those things. You can find something else to do that does not involve that. Although, if you live somewhere hot or cold, that might.
Yeah. It's sort of more or less layers.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you're going to have to figure it out. But, if you don't like being cold, well, wear more clothes. I don't know. There are ways to overcome these things, and or you find that you don't dislike the thing about it that you disliked at one point quite as much as you maybe did at, when you started. Like, you get used to it. I don't know.
Yeah, definitely. There's always that. I think running is one of the worst for them.
Hmm.
Like when you first start, it's so hard.
It is so
And
hard. Oh my
I'm not entirely sure it gets easier as though you just get like fitter and so you can do a bit more.
yeah.
But that first stage I think is definitely about like perseverance.
Yeah, and
Um
and I hear people say that they tried running and that they still hate it, and that's okay too.
yeah, absolutely. Like absolutely.
But
We all like different things.
absolutely. So if you hate running, try cycling. I personally really like to run, but really hate to cycle. I just
Oh, I'm
don't
the other way.
enjoy
Well,
it.
I like both, but I do love the bike. I find something very meditative about cycling.
And
But I think the other thing is, especially if you're sporty and then kind of you do a lot of like, I would say like urban sports or gym or it's a from uni or school. Sometimes coming to the outdoors, it's different because it doesn't have to be competitive.
mhm.
Like it can be, but I mean, I have no idea how fast I cycle or how fast I run. Probably not very fast because I like going a long way very slowly, mainly motivated by food. Um, but I think it's an interesting concept that away from somewhere like the gym, like we can do something just for enjoyment.
Mhm.
But that is a change of mindset from maybe more like urban sports.
Yeah, no, that's such a good point too. And on the getting easier thing, I think that it well, I find that the things that annoyed me when I first started running don't annoy me now. Because and I can only credit that to it being easier, right? That everything's not
Mm.
terribly irritating.
Yeah, yeah. Or you like know what to expect.
Right. That too. Okay, so we have you on today to talk about your research. So tell me about your career in research and women in adventure, and how you got started into that, and about your company that you run on that now.
So I have quite a eclectic kind of career pathway. I originally worked in digital health, and that's kind of where my interest in women in adventure started, because I was going outside and I was really interested, as I mentioned before, I turned to Google when I was getting into the outdoors, and I was really interested the more I was doing to read all these different opinions online, whether it was like, women love women only groups, or women hate women only groups, or all these differing opinions. And that triggered a really strong interest, being a scientist at heart, to try and understand, like, whether there was somewhere that gathered these opinions as like a collective voice and offered a platform for everyone to share their thoughts, as opposed to just those with, like, maybe like a large social media following or a blog. And so Women in Adventure came about to try and create that opportunity for a collective voice, because I felt that if brands and organizations were going to make change to help more women access the outdoors, change should be based on the opinion of as many women as possible, as opposed to just maybe the particular exposure that organization or brand saw. So that was how Women in Adventure was born. And it originally started as an unusual hobby. And kind of over the years, I moved into the outdoor industry. I was working there, and Women in Adventure alongside this was growing from strength to strength. And then 2 years ago, I actually took the decision to make Women in Adventure my full-time job. And that mainly came about, which I'm sure most people who do research and who kind of go on these hunts to try and find more information and data find, you do find the answers you're looking for, but you always come away with more questions. And I felt so passionate that I wanted to try and increase participation in the outdoors, improve diversity, and improve accessibility, that I wanted to make this my full-time focus. So that's how Women in Adventure came about. I think as well, like, there comes a point where you're trying to balance so many different things. Sort of, this was basically a full-time job. My other job was a full-time job, and
Yeah.
I also organise a climbing festival. So I think it was also a tiny bit of taking my own advice of getting outside, and the point where you're hanging up your climbing shoes for spreadsheets on a repeated basis. So I think you need to look at your work-life balance too.
Yeah. As somebody who has many full-time jobs, I sympathize.
Yeah.
I hear that. So why women specifically? Why not, humans in adventure, or, just overarching? Why dial in on just women?
I think initially it was a starting point. I was intrigued to find out, or to hear. It was said a number of times that the female perspective on adventure or experience of adventure was potentially different to men, and to rewind back to the beginning. I am a woman who does adventure. It felt like a really good starting point. Like that was the initial interest, and the conversation, or the kind of debate in my head that got me going on this research. And I think it's important to point out, like, when I say Women in Adventure and all my research, like, this is talking about anyone can choose to engage and connect with this. It isn't kind of specifically meant to be excluding anyone's opinion, but just creating that space to look at women in the outdoors, I felt was important at the time.
Yeah, I hear that, because I'm over here doing a challenge that's I've asking other people to jump in on, right? To spend 20 minutes outside a day, but it's purely selfish. I started it for me, and we're here talking about it because I think it's interesting. So, and I think other people think it's interesting too, but you have to start somewhere, right? And
definitely,
if it's interesting to you, it might be interesting to someone else. So why not?
I fully agree.
Hey humans, just a quick break to tell you how you can support the Humans Outside podcast. Did you know we're on Patreon? Patreon allows fans like you to support the podcast through a monthly pledge. By pledging a little cash each month to support the Humans Outside podcast, you can have access to my bonus features, guides, discount codes, and an exclusive episode on... You know what? Actually, just go check it out. You'll also get my eternal gratitude, of course. Check us out on Patreon at patreon.com/humansoutside. That's patreon.com/humansoutside. Now, back to the show. So I'm really excited to talk about your research into mental health and adventure. So let's do some quick level setting and define adventure. For the purposes of your research, what is adventure?
So my research looks at adventure sports. So what that meant in the context of this is that you are moving in an outdoor environment. You're doing something adventurous. So the easier way to, because I'm sure we'll talk about it in a moment, but the breadth of the different sports types of venture that people took part in was so broad that it's probably easier to give examples of maybe what's not included. So, for example, indoor climbing, although that's kind of adventurous, that's indoor. So that was not counted in the results of the survey. Outdoor climbing and bouldering, walking, all of that was included, but not indoor, because this is about being in that outdoor setting. And likewise, photography, although outdoors, was not counted as an adventure sport. So it was that combination of being in the elements, being outdoors, and moving your body.
But you could certainly be doing photography while running or whatever, right?
Yeah. So if you put your kind of activity as hiking, or even sort of hiking and photographing, or you just had to have the active element in the kind of definition I had.
I ask this because I think a lot of people, or I wonder if a lot of people don't think about themselves as being an adventure sport when they actually are.
It's a really tricky term, and it was. I mean, I could have done research on what to call it.
Yeah.
But the way I tried to approach it was, again, as I said earlier, that anyone who identified as being as engaging with the outdoors was more than welcome to put their opinion and share their opinion. And likewise, and when we're talking about women, this is anyone who identifies as a woman, including those outside of the gender binaries. So that was something that was very important to me, that this was a very welcoming, the way it was positioned and hopefully put to people was very welcoming and inclusive of all different opinions.
Have you heard any feedback from the people who have been involved with this, that they started thinking about themselves differently as a result of just participating, that like choosing to see yourself as participating in adventure when before this moment you just thought about yourself as going for a walk, right? Which a lot of people probably don't think of as adventure. Like, I just go on a walk every day. That changes folks. Have you heard any feedback?
I think I certainly had a few comments of people saying, "Oh, I don't know if I am a woman in adventure," and it certainly sparked a few discussions. And I think that was really interesting, because I think I probably have a very broad view of what adventure is, but I know that for some people, maybe the perception is it is kind of exclusively maybe someone who climbs massive mountains and does things that are very hardcore. And I think that actually over the past few years, we've, as a society and as an outdoor community, have really been expanding on that. And I feel that the space we're in now, adventure is thought of as a broader concept than just maybe the peak of a mountain. I feel like it can be found in every aspect of life.
It's this idea that whatever it is we're talking about is for someone else. that
Yeah.
adventure is for someone else. Adventure
It's
is,
relative.
yeah, it's relative. Like adventure isn't for me because I just go, on a walk in the woods every day. Or adventure is for, somebody who's kayaking, amazing rivers. And I don't kayak amazing rivers. I just take my kayak down this little creek near my house. Like
Mm.
sort of those juxtapositions. And, when we expand our definition of how we see ourselves, we expand our opportunities, I guess.
Hmm. Definitely.
So, give us a broad overview of what you found in your research. What is the correlation of adventure, sport, and mental well-being?
So the response to the survey was absolutely fantastic, and I was blown away with how many people participated, and also the depth in which they wrote. And the kind of the headline statistic was that 99.6% of women agreed that the outdoors had a positive impact on their mental well-being. Now, when I was writing up the kind of the main report, which is available on my website, I was going to round the numbers up to the nearest whole number just because for the the main infographic. I was like, that's basically 100%. Everyone's going to think I've rigged it, but it really was that high. And then other areas that also benefited were self-esteem, resilience, physical well-being, and also like your future outlook. So how you perceive your kind of future life prospects. So it was really brilliant to see that the outdoors had helped and had an impact on women in a really positive way.
Talk to us specifically about the findings around happiness, which is a factor of mental well-being, right? Like you broke mental well-being into 4 or 5 different
Yeah,
chunks.
so basically, I used what the Office for National Statistics in the UK used to measure mental well-being,
Okay.
and that's broken down into life satisfaction, so how satisfied you are with your life, how worthwhile you perceive what you're doing to be, your happiness on a day-to-day basis, and also your anxiety. And what I did is I looked at all these different measures in relation to different sports. So so many different sports took part in this in terms of the main ones were like hiking, cycling, running, swimming, climbing. However, beneath that, we had some really, really niche but very passionate individuals who put everything from like dragon boat paddling to like fixed seat Cornish gig rowing. I think we even had like orchid hunting. It was amazing. I absolutely loved looking into all these different sports. But going back to the results, what I did was try and have a look at the different sports and put them in a kind of in a scale of which sports benefited the individual's mental well-being the most. And that was where some really fascinating trends start to come out. So, for example, kayakers and skiers had the kind of the strongest mental well-being, whereas actually climbers, for example, were lower on the scale. Now, this is kind of relative. We have to remember that this is a scale, and this isn't like climbers have bad mental well-being and kayakers are all psyched. This is like a relative scale. The outdoors helps individuals' mental well-being, and this is just taking that a step further.
Right.
And what gets really interesting, and tell me if I'm like going on or getting too deep
love
here,
it.
is when we look at these 4 measures, so life satisfaction, worthwhile, happiness, and anxiety, we can also look at that for the different sports. And that to me was where the most fascinating trends started to come out. So for example, surfers had really high happiness and low anxiety, like in terms of compared to the survey average. However, their life satisfaction and their worthwhile were much lower. So it's really interesting to see how these trends kind of shifted for the individual sports. I think when we look generally, as participation increased, so you're getting out more often, happiness increased. Equally, as age increased, happiness increased. And overall, so therefore, those getting out more were finding they were happier.
I'm tempted to ask you, why are surfers, but at the same time, I know that you already said that you finished research and then you have more questions. And I suspect that the research that to this point does not show why surfers experience that. Although I could guess, like you're not catching a wave. Like that's not very satisfying.
I think there's some really interesting aspects of this. And when I'm kind of musing on potential whys, these are personal thoughts. Like I've not researched this yet. This is what I want to look at. I want to look at whether surfing, although you're part of a really strong community, when you're in the water, you are often by yourself. As maybe compared to other sports, which tend to be done as a group. I also wonder about access, like how easy it is to always access something like surf or conditions, or something like cost to be able to take part. I think there's so many different factors, and I'm really interested to see in future research how that all pans out and really explore these different mindsets and benefits, because I think it could be really useful for activity providers and organizations.
Yeah, absolutely. Like these therapeutic recreation folks too. Focus on finding ways to increase mental well-being among people who are going outside. Yeah. So why does going outside make us happier, which is what your research has shown? And specifically, like, what did your research uncover on that, if anything, on the why?
So I think something that was really interesting was looking at the kind of, like, I use the word like internal impact of outdoor adventure, and that being kind of the change in opinion or the potential change it causes to you and how you view yourself. And women in the survey reported that they felt more confident. There was this ability to like live in the present and believe in themselves. There was also a change in how women saw their bodies. There's an amazing quote. One of the women from the survey said, "I used to see my body as fat and useless, and now I see myself as adventurous, brave, and strong." And that transition from the, seeing yourself as strong, seeing, your legs as something that were able to get you to do something is amazing. And then alongside that, there was a lot of talk about how it changed women's perspective on how not only they looked at small problems and how they became, in day-to-day life almost easier to overcome because of that outdoor experience. It's also like the bigger picture and putting things in perspective. I think often that was used alongside like the sheer scale and size of nature and a real sense of appreciation for the landscape.
Yeah, it's going back to what we were saying earlier about seeing yourself as adventurous, as participating in adventure, and how that matters.
Yeah, and having a sense of like self-reliance and self-respect, and knowing that you are able in many different ways. I think if I had to draw one thing out of how it changed or how women felt it had altered their kind of lives and perception, was it gave a sense of belonging, a sense of self-esteem, self-worth, and confidence, and that like connectivity to both yourself and the world around you. I think that was something that came through incredibly strongly through the kind of long written answers.
Yeah, I feel like you can see that sense of, you can experience a sense of belonging in a lot of places, right? You can experience inside and outside in any kind of group. But that connectiveness to the world around you is unique to experiencing the world around you. But I do wonder if like you can experience that through creating art or, through music or things like that.
I think absolutely. I think if, I encourage anyone to go and do research because I'm a data nerd, but I highly suspect that something like, creating music, creating art, if you're passionate about something and it is an outlet for expressing yourself, I definitely think that's going to be beneficial for mental well-being. I think the outdoors is one of many ways we can help our minds and bodies.
I have these two memories that came to mind while you were talking. One is a mountain run I did with some friends, not this summer, but in 2019, I guess, where we summited these 7 peaks in a day. And it was, in the Anchorage area. So there are mountains all around. So it's not as out of reach as it sounds. But you get up there and you do have that moment where you're connected with the world around you, that you worked hard to get here. You're standing on top of literally a mountain, and you're looking around. There's no one else around, just you and the people you came with. And you feel this moment of being both the biggest and smallest thing in the whole world. And it's this just incredibly humbling and empowering feeling of that. I don't know that I could replicate anywhere, honestly.
I think it's so unique, and that ability to, I think, or at least for me personally, like quieten that internal voice, whether that's, it's different for everyone, but whether it's kind of self-doubt or, for some like sadness and grief, or even like there are so many, the outdoors is so pure that when you're like, I think when you're doing something and you're in that moment, it is all absorbing, and it really kind of takes your whole mind to what you're doing. And I think that's really incredible. I find it particularly with climbing, you get moments where you're like, oh my God, I just don't think I can, like, this is so scary. This is so, and every bit of you is going, nope, 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 nope. And you kind of you have to like reassure yourself, like rationalize, and you have the power to kind of, I don't know, not control in a bad way, but like support yourself through that moment.
Right.
And I think if you can get through that, then there's many things you can like apply that to and help in life outside of the outdoors.
The second thing that comes to mind is the first time I took my kids camping by myself without my spouse. And I very specifically remember being like, I just set up this when we went to the outdoor store, by the way, and bought all the things, like we bought the biggest tent our eyes could behold. Okay. It's like an 8-person, we call it the Taj Mahal. All right. It's humongous.
That's amazing. Such a good name for a tent.
Yeah, the Taj. And we bought it, in our defense, because we wanted to be able to camp with my then 1-year-old in a portable crib called a pack and play. So we wanted something that had room in it, because more than anything else, I wanted to go to sleep at night while we were camping.
Yeah.
And I knew if my kid was in his own bed, that would be possible. Anyway, so we go camping for the first time, just my sons and I set the tent up myself. All by myself. And this was a very big deal for me because I'd never done anything like that before. And then we spent the night there, and no one murdered us with an axe. And it was just this moment and then the next miracle was we had a good time. I'm here with a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old, and we're having a fantastic time together, and nobody has drowned and nobody's died, and everybody is dirty and happy and fed. And just, I remember sitting there and looking at these little boys playing in a spillway, and thinking about how I'd survived the night in this tent that I set up by myself, and just being like, if I can do this, darn it, I can pretty much do anything. I can do anything.
Yeah. It's that real sense of achievement. And I think something that's really that we see. So one of the things I do alongside the research, I love putting research into action, and I organise a climbing festival called Women's Trap Festival. And there we support everyone right through from total beginners that maybe have like never put on climbing shoes before, through to kind of outdoor professionals. And one thing that's incredible there is that it doesn't matter whether you come to the festival and what you've overcome your fear of heights that day, or you've overcome like I don't know, you've led the hardest route you've done to date, or even that you've been able to come to the festival by yourself and you've overcome the social anxiety or the fear around doing that. That kind of feeling of taking one step closer to having accomplished something yourself or beaten that goal or, overcome that fear, like the joy's the same, whatever level you're at. And I think it really brings people together and unites them in like a really lovely way. Because it doesn't matter like what area you're trying to push yourself in. It's the same or similar experience.
Yeah. No, I love that. I wanted to ask you about your focus on instances in the research versus
Yeah.
time. Just describe that for folks, because obviously I've read the study, but they haven't. What do I mean by instances? And then talk to us about why you talked about that versus like timing out times.
So essentially, I wasn't asking people how long did you spend outdoors? Like I spent 60 minutes or I spent 2 hours 45 versus how many times. So it's how often, getting out 3 times a week. I didn't mind whether on that day you got out for 3 hours or you got out for like 15 minutes. And that felt important to me because of the breadth and variety of sports and also the forms adventure can take. So if I look at that in like a personal context, I look at something like I love cold water swimming. It's a niche hobby, but I really enjoy it. And I love getting in very, very, very cold water throughout the year. And when I do that, I'm probably outdoors I'm actually in the water for maybe like in the coldest time, as little as like 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And I would say that the benefit mentally from that is equal to the same as doing like a 3-hour run. So it didn't feel from, the difference between the sports, it didn't feel fair to say that it was a time threshold as opposed to being able to get out.
There's a lot of curiosity and talk around this idea of dosage, that, time, right? That how much time is a dose? How much time is worth it? Where does the benefit start and where does it end? So for my challenge, I set my dosage, quote unquote, at 20 minutes a day, in part because I needed something to aim for, because I knew that if I didn't have like an expectation for myself around that, in the winter time in Alaska, I would go outside for 2 minutes and that would be it. And I wouldn't, and I'd go outside and I would I can just see me doing this, I'd stand in my driveway and I'd look around and be like, it's cold, goodbye. And I'd go back inside and that would be that.
Goodbye.
Yeah, that would be that. And so by saying I require myself to do 20 minutes, I turn that day that would have been me standing in the wind in my driveway being sorry that I was there into a little bit more preparation. I get a bigger jacket on and go walk in the woods where I'm actually glad that I did it. But when we talk about dosage, are we focusing on the wrong thing?
I think in terms of like, I was going to say like human to human, in terms of like advice for people getting out and wanting to try and get more into the outdoors, I think it is really good to have kind of not a hard and fast goal, but like set an amount you can work with. Like it's a little bit of a challenge, but it also does fit with your life. It's all great and wonderful. Like we would all love to be out, or at least I would love to be outside all the time, all day, like for everything. But that's not realistic around like work, life commitments. So actually maybe having that commitment of a dosage time that works for you is really good. I think in terms of what I was looking at within the research was not to exclude anyone that does get a benefit from longer or shorter kind of dose times, and keeping it about trusting the individual to decide themselves what counts as getting out, because they at that point must feel they have experienced the mental benefit. If you've been out for 20 minutes and it helps you, then that counts as like I go out 5 days a week, or how many days a week. If you, for example, today I've like popped to the shop to get a sandwich. So far, I would not say I've like done anything outdoors adventure-y today. So I did trust the kind of respondents to be able to navigate that aspect themselves. But I think, there's so much to look at, and there's so many different studies and so many different areas in this that I just, like, even now I can just think of so many interesting questions to explore that surround even like dose time and looking at kind of time versus frequency. I think, it's a never ending area we can all like go and look at.
Absolutely. That's yeah. I mean, here we are. We've been talking about this for about 40 minutes, so we can talk about it for a
It's so easy to, there's so much, and as I said at the beginning, you just discover more things you want to learn about and know.
Yeah. What surprised you out of your research?
I think, aside from like the depth in which people wrote, was probably that as a survey average, when I looked at the different measures, so life satisfaction, worthwhile, anxiety and happiness, compared to the UK female average, actually my survey average was lower than the UK female average, which really surprised me initially, because I was like, what? The outdoors, it's so good for our mental well-being. Like, why? How is this occurring? But actually, when you then broke that down and looked at, like, maybe those that were able to get out regularly, or were kind of participating more often, that was above the survey average. But for those that loved the outdoors but were not able to access it, they were kind of suffering because of their, like, because they couldn't get out and they couldn't access it.
Yeah.
But I think what it comes back to as well, though, is that irrespective of whether your kind of happiness is like a 10 out of 10 happy or a 1 out of 10 happy, the one thing that 99.6% of women agreed on was that the outdoors helped. So actually, whatever level you're coming from, whether you're coming from the top of the scale or the bottom, the outdoors was beneficial and provided that support and improvement. So potentially imagine what those numbers might have been without the outdoors.
Right. Such a good point.
But yeah, that was quite surprising initially.
Yeah, I'd say. But I love that you were able to dial down in there and sort of and figure out what's going on there. I've heard that too from people, that the only problem with developing an outdoor habit is not that they wish they were outside all the time.
Yeah. I think it's quite common with us all.
So, and now their satisfaction went up, sort of,
Yeah.
So we've come to our leftover round, where I like just to know a couple of things from our the people we have on the podcast. Just like some leftover stuff, I guess.
Cool.
So I love to know what people's most essential and then favorite outdoor gear is, because then I go shopping. So tell me, what is your favorite outdoor gear? What's an item that you just love? Like, yeah, maybe you can live without it, but you just love it.
Am I allowed to include my bike? I didn't know if that was like...
Oh, yeah.
I didn't know if that was like too big a thing. I think probably my... I've got a gravel bike and I love riding it everywhere. I like the fact it can just do a bit of everything, and around here it's really fun to explore, even in winter when it's super muddy. That'd be my
we've had people say
unpartable item.
We've had people say that their favorite thing is snacks. So you know what?
I think
big or small.
The essentials though are probably slightly different. Like, my favorite thing is my bike. Essentials, like in terms of something I carry with me, irrespective of what I'm doing, is normally, I don't know if this is like just a British term, but like duct tape, like gaffer tape, super strong tape.
Yep.
That can mend anything, whether it's your tent, your bike, your rucksack. That's just like a go-to. And then maybe aside from that is like cheese and snacks. Definitely.
You will be relieved to hear that duct tape and cheese are both universal. So
amazing. Yay. I think if I had an unusual item, it would be my Kindle. It doesn't matter how little I pack or how long the trip, the Kindle always ends up coming with me.
Oh no,
I love reading books.
Same way. A backpacking trip is a way for me to go somewhere where I can read without being distracted. And the Kindle.
It's funny when you're cutting weight left, right, and center. You're getting rid of your extra pair of socks because your bag's really heavy, or you've got limited amount of like space on the bike you can store stuff. And then you're like, but the Kindle has to come too.
Yeah, 100%. But just think about
Yeah.
it this way. It's so much lighter weight than a huge book.
I know. I've used that argument many times before when I've been told, you can't take this up this mountain. I'm like, I can.
And I will. It weighs less than Anna Karenina printed by itself. And it has like 17,000 options
I
on
know.
it.
I've got so many books on this.
Love it. Okay, so we like to end just sort of walking back with our guest and hearing about a favorite outdoor moment that they have, just being taken where they are. So if you thought, of your favorite outdoor moment and just closed your eyes and envisioned it, where are you and what are you doing? Take us there.
I think something that's really vivid in my mind is I was climbing in the Alps on a route on Tour Ronde, and we were halfway up this big, like kind of it's sort of around 4,000 meters multi-pitch climb. And there's this huge granite slab, and it was just, the sun had just come up because we got up super early for an alpine start. And I was looking across this slab, and the rock was so beautiful, and the sun was just coming up, so it was like kind of slightly sparkling because the light was catching some of the granite. And I remember looking across it and thinking, I have no idea how I'm going to climb that, but it is the most beautiful thing I've seen. And I did make it across, and actually it was one of those incredible climbs where actually the moment you start and you're looking for the next sort of handhold and foothold, they did appear, and it just made the experience so magical. Like just the sunrise, the color of the rock, the color of the sky, and to be so high above everything was, very breathtaking.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for being on the Humans Outside podcast today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been so nice to chat.
That's it for this week's episode of the Humans Outside podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, give us a little love and leave a rating and review to make it easier for others to find the podcast too. And by supporting us on Patreon, you get access to exclusive supporter-only benefits while making sure we can keep the podcast going. A huge, huge thank you to our current supporters. Until next time, we'll see you out there.